now joined by Congressman Gabe Vasquez, a Democrat who represents a border district in New Mexico that has informed, obviously, his life experiences, which have thus informed a number of policy positions, whether it comes to border, immigration, and really informing the Democratic Party and how to move forward on those issues. So, Congressman, thanks for making your 535 debut.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Mariana.
So today you introduced a new piece of legislation.
Yeah.
It's called the Care Worker Visa Act,
Yes.
which would create a new legal visa pathway for qualified workers.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about the lack of caregivers.
Yes.
And that kind of falls into this affordability conversation that Democrats have been having for the past year. Republicans are also having that as well. Tell me about this bill and why is it important right now?
Well, I'd say this is both a caregiver bill and an economic bill. I say this because in New Mexico, we have a growing elderly population as an example, and many folks who have to take care of their aging parents, sometimes grandparents, they're left without opportunities for workforce development, to obviously get an education, to get a job. So by creating this new visa category to fill many of these caregiving jobs that right now we're in deep shortage of, including in New Mexico, we can create opportunities for families to go to school, to be able to go to workforce training opportunities, to get a job, and so many folks I hear from back home say, if I didn't have to care either for my child, an aging parent, or even somebody, a family member with disabilities, they could really be in a better position economically. But look, this is one of the common sense issues that I think, red or blue, doesn't matter. We care for our kids and we care for our elders, and we know that immigrants are already doing this job overwhelmingly across the country.
Yeah, so the visa, this would again create a new category.
Mm-hmm.
It would be capped, I believe, to $100,000 a year.
Yes.
And clarify for me, would this apply to those who are in the country legally and then some who are continue to be undocumented as well? How does that, how would that go?
So this is for both, for
Okay.
applicants outside of the country and for applicants that are currently in the country.
Got it.
For those that are currently in the country, an employer could sponsor them. And in many cases, some of these folks are already doing these jobs, right? You look at Florida, where a majority of their caregiving industry is done by immigrants. Those folks, if they may not be right with the law, if they are working without legal status, they could apply for this special category of visa. Now, we also put restrictions in here to protect the American worker, and I think that's really important part of this conversation, which is why this bill is endorsed. It's union endorsed, right? And that's important because essentially what we have to do is look at places where there aren't Americans to take these jobs, where there is a shortage, and to pay prevailing wages to make sure that they're not out-competing American workers. And so this really addresses this from a very common sense way, capped at 100,000. And again, most importantly, look, we want our elders and especially our kids. I mean, we see it here in DC, right, Mariana? Yeah. Lawmakers, when they're here on the Hill and folks are pushing strollers down Capitol Hill, I can tell you about 90% of those nannies and the caregivers for those kids, they're not speaking English, right? And hopefully those babies and those young kids are learning some different languages. But I think the lawmakers see it here too, which is really important.
So you've done maybe, I don't want to say the easiest part. Cobbling legislation can be pretty in the weeds, difficult.
Yeah.
But you've introduced it. Now what's the plan next? You're going to socialize it among Republican and Democrats. And talking about immigration generally, both parties have become so polarized on the issue. You're so familiar with that.
Yes.
I find it kind of hard to see Republicans wanting to put a bill like this forward simply because I can already hear, especially those in the more far-right flank, saying, wait, creating a whole new visa system? That's too much. We don't want to, we don't necessarily want to incentivize people to, again, cross the border, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure you've already heard of, in your mind, what the pushback could be on something like this.
Well, I think the momentum comes from the people, right? And we're here to represent the people. This is the House of Representatives, and so the lawmakers, I'm sure, will hear about this issue from their constituents back home if they haven't already. And so it's important that we are reflecting the will of the American people. And I think what's happening right now with this draconian enforcement, agency that is going out and targeting immigrant communities, folks that look like me, to be very honest, terrorizing American citizens. I mean, we saw what happened in Minneapolis. Americans are looking for an alternative. And I think those bipartisan solutions really have to be rooted in what people want in this country. And clearly, they don't want what's happening with this administration, but they also don't have any confidence that Congress can get anything done, because we run into these stalemates when it comes to a common sense issue like providing caregiving to communities and to families. And so Democrats have gotten it wrong, Republicans have gotten it wrong. Comprehensive immigration reform is one of the most elusive things to do in this body. But look, if we can go to the moon a couple of times, this body should be fully capable of making common sense reforms to our immigration system. And that's one of the reasons that I am here.
Yeah.
You know, I am one of the few members that crosses the border when I go back home to my district to see his family. I grew up on both sides of the border. I know immigration very intimately, both from the family and visa side, but also when it comes to things like border security. You know, I encourage my colleagues, my Democratic colleagues, to not just take that CODEL and, you know, get to look at the border wall from binoculars, but to actually understand the intricacies of what a secure border means, learn how our border operates, learn about international trade, about customs and border protection and their various duties, all those kinds of things. I think we have, as a body, a responsibility to the American people to have a plan for border security in addition to immigration reform.
Let's talk a little bit more about your new American immigration plan. It's obviously like the guiding light, I think, for you and on this issue.
Yes.
You've informed, for example, the new Democratic coalition. We talked to Congressman Schneider earlier today. Yeah. You helped kind of build their immigration plan there. You've also been part of the working group with, or under Congressman Pete Aguilar.
That's right.
To also help inform leadership, because this is an issue, as you mentioned, that Democrats have not been able to pass. Even when it's been a Democratic trifecta, they haven't been able to really tackle immigration. So as you've had these conversations across the caucus, you are proposing this plan, given your own life experiences, but where are the issues still where Democrats can't really agree on border security, on immigration, because it is such a massive issue to tackle?
Absolutely. Well, look, we're seeing it just this week. In the absence of a solid Democratic plan or agenda, we're voting on 2 years of funding for ICE without restrictions, after a government shutdown, after failed negotiations. Democrats didn't get anything out of that. And in response, right, we're going to vote against that bill, which is terrible. But at the same time, what is our proposal? And so the new American immigration plan spells it out pretty simply to the American people. And it starts with securing our borders and border security. As Democrats, we have to be comfortable talking about that and, again, proposing solutions for that to make the American people trust the Democratic Party again. And that's important, especially coming from a district like mine. Secondly, it's about the economy, right? We know that farm workers in my district, as an example, who voted for the president are saying, Gabe, my onions are going to rot out in the field if you don't get me the immigrant workers that I need this year, and they're not coming anymore because of what's happening with ICE, right? And so across various industries, healthcare, construction, caregiving, farm workers, it benefits the American economy to have a sensible immigration plan. And then American values and humanity. I visited every detention center in my district. I visited Camp East Montana and El Paso. Those places are not reflective of our American values. And honestly, we are torturing people and separating families inside those facilities. People don't want that either. And lastly, legal pathways, right? And it doesn't all have to be citizenship. You know, if you look at guest worker programs, some folks want to come here and work in an industry and perhaps return back to their home country. It's different for everybody and for every family. And so providing more legal pathways to have legal status, such as this caregiver visa, is a start to that conversation. And so I'm not sure we're going to get one big package, but let's talk about the things that make sense, and as Democrats propose those solutions and come together.
We've talked about this before, how, you know, Leader Jeffries has said that the agenda going into the midterms, and obviously if you all win the majority, is really going to focus on affordability, healthcare, and corruption. There's some elements to what you're talking about that falls under the affordability category, but I'm also still waiting to hear if leadership is going to put immigration as part of the Democratic priority, because you talk about gaining trust back with voters. Voters are upset with Republicans and Trump. A lot of polls showing that they are more willing to vote for Democrats to have control of Congress, but they still don't trust the party. So is this possibly a missed opportunity if there isn't a push by Democratic leaders to at least vote on a number of policies that fall into this area?
Absolutely. It's a huge missed opportunity, and we see as the president's rating and the Republican Party's rating on immigration and how they're handling this issue continues to tank, we have to have an answer. And communities like mine and districts like mine demand an answer, because when Democrats had a supermajority under the Obama administration and saw that, that immigration got pushed to as a third rail issue, that hurt a lot of people who I think Democrats took for granted were going to vote Democrat no matter what. That's one of the reasons that Latinos don't trust Democrats on this issue. And so leadership needs to step it up. I've been knocking on their doors. I've been talking about this in terms of we all have to get together, from the Progressive Caucus to the Blue Dogs to the moderates. Everybody in this big tent umbrella of the Democratic Party has to unite under a vision for immigration reform, what that looks like. And it starts, I believe, with my plan, the New American Immigration Plan, which is a basic set of values that follows up on larger principles of how we actually get there, so that we can actually prepare the American people for these proposals. And if we have to tackle one of these issues individually, I think we're perfectly capable of doing that as a body here in Congress, which is why I can't wait till we have the majority and actually work through the policy. But for now, we cannot stay quiet. We cannot go quietly into the next election without addressing immigration, because I can guarantee you a lot of Latinos will be disappointed, and immigrants across the country.
Yeah, I hear your excitement about what the majority could look like. I mean, even just looking at the candidates, Democratic candidates across the country, you could be potentially joined by more border Democrats. There's a couple along Texas, obviously Henry Cuellar and Vicente Gonzalez have been here for a long time. They have been telling the Democratic Party and warning them for probably a decade of a number of things that you're still talking about now. You've added to that as when you were elected. I'm also thinking about Juan Ciscomani. He's in a very tough race, and there could be a Democrat, again, representing a border in Arizona. That's a pretty significant coalition. Are you talking to those candidates and saying, hey guys, like, this is what I'm thinking about? Does it jive with what you're hearing on the ground? And if you're elected, will you co-sponsor a number of these bills? Like, how are you starting to think about that coalition building that could form?
Yeah, absolutely. I spoke with Bobby Pulido just recently, a great candidate from Texas. Y le hablé en español cuando me habló. I was like, it's pride to have more candidates that come from border districts that understand the dynamics of the border, really get it. And so between candidates like Bobby and Joanne Mendoza as well, who I've spoken with, they understand the nuances of what folks want in their communities, especially in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas, where you saw those really big swings between Latinos that went for Trump and that had voted Democrat, several elections passed. There is a nuance there that I think the larger DC political machine does not understand. And I think it's about fairness and about justice and about families like mine, to be honest. Some of my family members who have waited a decade or more going through the visa process weren't too happy with what happened with the asylum and humanitarian crisis that we saw, because they felt like, hey, we've been waiting in line for a long time. And so those dynamics along the border play out differently for Latinos, an example, than they do in Florida for Cuban Americans or for Venezuelan Americans and others. But we really need those folks that are subject matter experts to help lead this conversation and help shape immigration policy. And I think we are the best candidates to do it. I think our voices deserve to be heard, so that somebody, no offense, but from Nebraska or from Michigan or from somewhere far removed from where we're facing these issues is actually, those are the folks that are dictating policy and talking about this. I think we got to bring it back home to the border and have good candidates create good policy.
Well, Congressman, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course.
There's a lot to talk about, so please come back anytime you introduce something new.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Mariana.
Of course.